Bayyana, welcome. I know we've been already
Hello.
talking now for 10 minutes. Welcome to the official portion of Meet and Knows.
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to start with your introduction. So Bayyana Davis is a senior marketing manager at IFF, specializing in the savory and beverage categories for North America Taste Division. She is a forward-thinking marketer with experience in providing consumer and market trends with actionable insights for a variety of customers and industries. Bayyana has a BS in business with a concentration in marketing and an MBA, both from Montclair State University. As an avid foodie and cocktail enthusiast, Bayyana brings her love of travel, perfume, and art to her craft and immerses her customers in unique storytelling excursions tailored for discovery. She has recently become a foray into the world of indie perfumery, which is how we met her. So I'm really happy to have met her that way. And has started a new Instagram account called Lips and Scents, where she pairs different perfumes with lip colors. So she works at IFF. I did mention that. So if you can learn more about international fragrance, flavors and fragrance, we'll pop the link in the chat. Actually, Minetta already did because she's amazing. And then Bayyana, you can follow her on Instagram at Lip Sense and at Clear Evidence. So welcome, Bayyana.
Thank you.
Super happy to have you. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin your video.
Okay.
So Bayyana, I just want to, I welcomed you, I read your bio, and I just like to sort of hear about it from your own words. So where are you from originally? Let's start with the total beginner.
I was born and raised in New Jersey, but I joke with a lot of my friends that I'm probably like a Canadian at heart. I'm just, tend to be very friendly and love people. But yeah, born and raised New Jersey.
Are New Jersey people like not friendly typically, or not?
It depends.
Well, they're
It
tough,
depends.
right? Like New Yorkers.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm born and raised closer to the New York than to Philadelphia. But no, I think I have more like Canadian just sensibilities.
That's cool. I don't think I've ever met anyone who said that they're Canadian at heart. That's a cool thing. I totally understand what you mean too. So okay, so from New Jersey, and so you did your studies in business. So you definitely have a business mind. So what sort of led you to business?
I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, and then or a doctor, then a teacher, and then I thought, no, I don't want to do those either. It was the pay. It was going to be way more schooling than I wanted to do. And so I kind of just said business can work. It's multifunctional. I can go into different areas. I've always kind of been into understanding people and their shopping habits. And so I kind of got it down the path of like merchandising and marketing and kind of bringing that all together. So once I got to maybe high school, I stuck with always wanting to go into business. I didn't know where in business, but I knew it was going to be business.
That's cool. So just so what was it about business that attracted you? You said you were into people, communication.
Yeah, there's part just understanding about people, kind of like that psychology, like in sociology of understanding. I just had a kind of a fascination towards that. I think I always loved, really good advertising, whether it be in print or not digital at the time, but then television, and just kind of there's certain commercials I still remember. So, I know that, and thinking of that in terms of advertising, maybe going into that. So it just thinking like I can go into so many different fields within business and just kind of keeping that kind of open for me.
Yeah, it's funny because it's true, because business, I mean, you study business and really you can do anything, Yeah. It's funny. Some ads stick with me too. I still remember some ads from my childhood. Mostly like Saturday morning cartoon ads, though. But so your business, the interesting aspect of business for you was that communication, advertising, marketing thing, right? So,
yeah, a lot of it really in that kind of just what could anticipating what consumers may want if they don't even know yet, or bringing kind of that product to a consumer. Is really kind of that whole idea of marketing and kind of that storytelling element that I really liked. And I've just been fortunate along the way to kind of do more of that the older I've become.
Yeah.
In my role.
So what was your first job out of business school? Like where did you start career-wise? I know.
Oh, so
your first job you want to share.
Oh, yeah. I think first job out of college, probably working at Toys R Us. In the now defunct office that was in Times Square.
Oh yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting experience. They had like corporate offices in there. So that was my first sort of, when you grow up in New Jersey, if you live close to the city, one of those dreams is everybody works in the city. You always want to work there. You take the train over. It's like this whole allure of that. And then probably by year one, it's like kind of over it. It's like, all right, I've gotten this out of my system, but I did stay through some other subsequent jobs in New York. So I kind of completely got that out of my system. So I've done that. I've other jobs I've had in the past, a lot of retail. So I've worked at places like the Gap, a lot of years at Sephora. I worked at Build-A-Bear, which was a lot of fun. Just working with the kids and making their little dreams come true was probably one of the highlight jobs that I've ever had. Doesn't pay well, but it was a fun job that I've done. So it's always been working with other people. Always been working with other people.
And you know, toys and bears. So there's definitely like a theme towards sort of happy making here already.
Yes,
you know?
yes. I always, when I was in college or after college, I regret not doing one of those like study at like the semesters at Disney or doing something like that, just to kind of like bringing joy to other people. I find that that's one of those kind of key things I like to do.
So how did that transition into flavors? I mean, because you bring joy to other people in a different way now.
Correct. Correct. So a lot of those kind of early jobs were always in retail. And then I kind of switched into working in market research for several years. So there, again, that's really that tying in of, understanding consumers, understanding trends, doing a lot of surveys, focus groups, and really trying to help companies determine, what they want to do next, what white space opportunities they have, and things like that. So I did it for quite a few years, but it kind of run its course. Like, okay, it's constantly moving, but I'm doing the same thing over and over. Sometimes the trends don't change as often as they want them to. So I kind of was getting a little stagnant in that role. I went back to school for my MBA, because I felt like I had been going down the research path for so long that I didn't want to get stuck there. And so that was, part of that reason for moving to get my MBA. And then from there, it just kind of opened me up to, just new opportunities of what I can do. And I had made kind of this marketing plan, which would be the equivalent of a vision board, but for, trying to pick a new career path sort of thing. And so on that, I had like kind of this like mission statement of, what kind of dream role would I want to have, some companies I would want to work for, in different sectors that were different from kind of the traditional market research. And so IFF happened to be on that list. I had come in contact with them at another company I was in, where they were talking about, oh, we get some of our flavors from this company, IFF. I was like, get your flavors? Like, I didn't understand what that meant. Like, what do you mean get your your flavors? Yeah. And so I started looking. I was like, okay, there's a whole industry of, flavors and fragrance. And it just so happened that a lot of the headquarters are in New Jersey. It's a very weird thing. So a lot of companies here. So I had IFF on the list, but I knew that I had been like I said, so many years in market research. How was I going to make this transition into kind of a more traditional sort of marketing role? So I ended up applying for a job on their research side. And in the end of that conversation, I was talking to the HR person, and I said, hey, I'm actually, more open to other types of positions, not just this one. And I just was kind of vocal. I typically am not the person that would say, hey, this is really what I'm thinking. I kind of keep that internal. But for some reason, I said, let me just speak up. Yeah. And so I didn't end up getting the research job, and I'm glad for that. But about maybe a couple weeks later, a job had posted on the flavor side of the business. I immediately applied, and the HR person actually reached out to me and said she was going to tell me to apply, but I already beat her to it.
Oh, that's cool. Like-minded.
Yeah. And so I ended up going for the interview, and I got the job that same week. So it has been been a perfect match. I felt like I was part of a family. They, just kind of let me grow, be very entrepreneurial, try different things out, kind of, and bring the loves of other things that I've done really to this role. And so I've been at IFF ever since.
That's cool. So, I mean, you must have had to learn a lot about flavors when you first joined, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
big crash course. There's a difference from just food and that, you things you eat or you're drinking, And then just kind of understand this whole other life of things being dosed into, you know, foods that you're having, beverages. There's technologies, things that, you know, make things more sour, make things more bitter. It's just a whole other world that you don't know exists. As well as I also started to learn more about the fragrance side. You know,
Right.
always liked to wear fragrance and perfumes and things, but I had no idea just how big the industry was, and how many opportunities there are, how many great people there are. So it's been a real fun ride.
Are you currently you're spending, I mean, I know, I mean, and I know that, you know, within IFF, there's divisions. Like, are you able to access some of the fragrance resources at IFF in your flavors division, or is there some crossover?
There is some crossover. So with working on the marketing side, I actually interact with their marketing team as
Hmm.
well. So we tend to share a lot of the trends, what's going on, because there's a lot of times where, especially in the world of beverage, a lot of the trends start on the perfume side. So
Oh,
for
interesting.
example, bartenders in particular, they look at what's happening in the world of perfumery and in the space in culinary,
Hmm.
and they kind of pair those together, right? So you'll get some floral, some botanical mixed with a blistered regional fruit
Hmm.
that's also that also has, you know, interesting color or interesting presentation. And so it's kind of mixing all these things together. It might have aromatic elements as well.
Oh,
And so from there, the alcohol companies see what's going on in the bars, and they kind of translate and mimic that into alcoholic beverages that you would find in like a store.
hmm.
And then from there, let's say a non-alcoholic company may see what the alcohol companies are doing, and then they mimic it into their applications and so forth. Then it goes to this like a sweet category: confections, chocolates, biscuits, dairy, yogurts, drinkable dairy, and it kind of just keeps going. So
Wow.
it's all kind of interconnected in a really fun way. So I love to talk to our counterparts, see what's going on in their world. So it helps to kind of inform what's going on for us. But it also works vice versa. There are plenty of times that they reach in, they ask us what's going on, and it's kind of this shared experience. So it's been
That's
really
cool.
fun.
Is there like an example of something like that that you have top of mind that sort of went through all those different categories? Like maybe botanicals? I feel like
Yeah,
botanicals are having a moment.
botanicals are definitely hugely having a moment. So obviously on the scent side, but botanicals also have had a real emergence with things like gin.
Oh yeah.
So gin being really popular, this, you know, the process of this distillation, using things like juniper berry, and just all of that, this romance, this history and story behind it, really translated into alcoholic beverages and kind of everywhere. I mean, there are a ton of florals that we talk about now. They're just like hibiscus in particular is
Oh yeah.
everywhere.
It's a nice color too. It's nice and pink, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's huh. Yeah. So I mean, so are you, I mean, do you notice, I mean, so you said this often starts with fragrance and then
Mm-hmm.
translates into beverage, but I mean, have you ever seen it the other way around? I don't know. I mean, has there ever been like, what about like a drinkable dairy product? Has that ever influenced? I mean,
A
sorry, silly
drinkable
question.
dairy, you know, where I'll see is in indulgent. So a lot of dessert makes
All right.
sense to go into like home care,
Right.
candles,
Oh
things
yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
like the vanillas, the pound cakes, the bourbons, all of those are translated that way.
Yeah.
And then I guess you could think about the gourmand in a sense, but also how that is, you know, on both sides, just in different sort of ways. But
Yeah.
in the indulgence dessert sweets is probably the easiest to translate the other way.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm thinking of, you know, those La Durée macarons, you know, and they made
Mm-hmm.
those candles
Mm-hmm.
that were like, oh, they're all inspired by the different macaron tastes. So,
There's one, I feel like it's one of the Escada scents that came out maybe last year, but it's like tequila. It smells like tequila. It's got like
no
tequila
way.
and lime sort of note. So it's definitely going both ways for
That's
sure.
cool. So your work is very closely associated with communication, obviously, and you must have to explain flavor a lot. Although I'm sure you're mostly speaking to people who kind of get it. But I
Yes.
mean, how do you explain the potential of something so intangible? You know?
Well, a lot of times I think, you know, we're working with, like you said, they were working with the people who do this every day, the bakers, the mixologists, you know, they're willing to try different things out. but it's really not that much different than I think describing sort of the scent side. You know, you have elements like accords, you're talking profiles, character, descriptions, all that still applies. Sometimes our flavorists, which would be the equivalent of like a perfumer, they'll make more abstract flavors, and that's really kind of describing a feeling or an emotion. So that's probably the closest where it's similar to that kind of abstract, the way talking abstractly about things, you know, where how they were inspired by it, where it may transport you. You know, it's all those elements kind of coming together, but it's not as hard, I think, as kind of selling it in on the scent side.
Right, because everybody. Oh, I mean, I guess because our knowledge about taste and flavor is a lot higher generally, right, than scent. Like everyone eats, you know.
Everyone.
Yeah, it's pretty
Everyone
crucial.
eats, and it's also kind of in that description. It's kind of like as you want to write it as if as they're tasting it, that's what they're going to hit next as they taste. So thinking about as it moves on their tongue, like, okay, you're going to hit this, you know, note first. Where is it going to finish? So as it, you're like, yeah, I can see that, you know, like it's that type of writing style.
Do you get to taste all this stuff that you're?
I do.
Oh man, I feel like that would be such a cool...
which has been really fun. When I first started at IFF, a lot of what I worked on was alcohol, so that was a lot of fun for good and for bad. I mean, there were some mornings, you know, I would taste about 30 types of whiskey by 9 a.m. Yeah, that was a bit harsh those days. Those are a bit harsh, but it's expanded over time. You know, I work with some amazing chefs that have really opened my eyes up to some of these ingredients and flavors and spices and that I've never heard of and try, and they make it all taste amazing. So lots of tasting. In the world that we're living in now, everything just gets shipped to my house for tasting, which isn't a bad deal.
No, yeah, your family's like, yes.
Yes. We've had some fun tastings here for sure.
So by the way, Dawn says that the perfume, an example of a perfume, Penhaligon's Juniper Sling, was inspired by gin. So thanks, Dawn, for that. So what's the weird? So okay, I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start. Okay, I'm excited. I'm gonna stick to some of the questions I prepared just because I want to make sure we touch on it, and then we'll go from there. But do flavors break down into types like fragrance? And I think you already said it does. But
yeah, I mean, so we have, you know, you obviously have kind of a different layer when it comes to, well, I guess it'll be similar. You could do sweet, sour, kind of playing all the senses, bitter. We have that kind of umami, savory richness sort of thing. But we also kind of go into basic categories: berry, citrus, orchard, tropical, sweet browns. Similar how you can have this like a fragrance wheel. We have wheels, same.
Wow.
It can be broken down in a lot of different ways. We can have, you know, beer wheels. We can have vanilla wheels.
Wine wheels.
In every kind. Wine.
Yeah.
Yep. All of those exist.
Wow.
For sure.
So is there a category that you really like? You know.
On the food side or on the scent side?
Well, let's start with food and then with scent.
Food side. I'm really like confections and sweets, although I don't work on that currently. And definitely I love a good dessert. I follow way too many Instagram accounts for desserts and cookies and just fun stuff like that. Obviously a lover of a good cocktail. I find it fascinating how they kind of put these things together and these interesting combinations, and then you just like, that shouldn't work, and then it really works. So probably those two are my favorites.
Yeah. I'm into gourmand fragrances myself. I'm like, I don't care. I like them. You know, I smell like that.
That's me. I mean, it's like when I get on that side of the business, the older I've gotten and really started to, you know, kind of get into this other world. One of the things that attracted me to it was understanding, all right, out of the scents that I like, what are those elements that keep showing up? Are there notes that are common in them? And the one that stands out across ones that I've made myself or ones that I buy is always vanilla. Vanilla is always present at some level, either a lot, or it's like, you know, one of the kind of bigger components, or something really subtle in the background. But I like scents that you have to come kind of close to me. It's kind of this intimate sort of exchange. It's a level of kind of comfort as well. I also like things that have caramel, so it's definitely in this gourmand space. violet,
Oh,
iris.
yeah.
Those two things kind of remind me of kind of flowers used to have around the house. So it takes me
Mm.
back to just being outside with my father. Things like neroli, orange blossom. I find that sandalwood is always present.
Who doesn't love a
Um,
sandalwood? It's my
I like
favorite.
what else? Strawberry, just randomly. Strawberry, jasmine shows up, and peony. Never would have
Peony.
thought peony. Yeah, it's just
Interesting.
and a couple things like really that's in there. So it's just interesting to know kind of so just things that I like that I would have not thought of.
Do you ever see these sorts of materials that you're talking about translate into the flavor side of your work? I mean, like for instance, violet. I know there are the violet
Mhm.
candies, rose water, things like
Yes.
that.
Yes, we have seen a couple different things. We've been doing some things too, where we've been doing some unique pairings with, like, especially violet. Looking at it like on a molecular level, what else it pairs with, maybe another fruit that have similar kind of components.
Hmm.
So we do see it having definitely some crossover.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Although I don't
Um,
necessarily think I'll see sandalwood.
yeah, yeah,
um,
that I've never seen
that
that.
no, I have seen it once. I have seen it
Really?
once. Um, at a restaurant that was in the city. I think the drink was called Campfire, and it came in like under a glass dome. And when you took the glass dome off, it like had all this sandalwood aromatics
No
coming
way.
out. So it felt like you
Oh,
were at like a campfire about to roast marshmallows.
oh, how
That was the
lovely.
only time I've seen it in an execution. hmm
I mean, because you do see things like you see those chewing gums, especially, gosh, I'm forgetting what country, but a country in the Middle East where they have these musk chewing gums, and you're chewing it and it tastes like the musk, perfume materials, and this, yeah, sandalwood sounds pretty cool. There's this bartender in London who's doing these perfume inspired drinks. I'm sure you've heard of him. I'm forgetting his name, but he did a Chanel No. 5 drink. He was sort of famous for
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes. I can't think of their name. I can't think of his name
Yeah.
either, but I do know
Yeah.
who you're
Me
talking
either.
about.
There's a couple of comments and questions. So
Oh, good.
just going back a little bit, Rachel and Redding, hi Rachel,
hmm
says, in speaking with other people in flavor, I was told that the actual taste of hibiscus teas, etc., comes mainly from the rose hips, while the hibiscus functions largely to lend the color. Is that indeed the case? Do you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you are probably correct. I do know when we taste it, it's naturally very bitter. So it
Oh,
always has to obviously, we're adding sweetener, we're adding other things to kind of brighten it up. But if you just naturally have it, if you just kind of, make it into just a basic tea, it has a very bitter taste. But I'm not sure for certain. But there could be someone in the chat that could answer it.
yeah.
There
Yeah.
might be
We can
someone.
Google it too.
Yeah.
Um, and then everyone's sort of asking about flavors wheels and a couple Dawn, I think, shared a resource for wine wheels for those. I know that we have a couple sommeliers in the audience. I know Susan is one and
Awesome.
Dawn. So, and then
That's very cool.
I know, yeah, totally. It's a whole
Such an
different level.
appreciation. I know, but it's such an appreciation. I commend you.
So I have a question about the yuck factor. So everyone has a yuck factor. I have I don't want to eat that. How do you
Yeah.
navigate that, yourself and also with your clients?
So for myself, there are only a few ingredients that I can't do. One of them being stevia, or just
Stevia.
kind of these kind of like just sweeteners in general. I will manage, but it's like, okay, what do you really need me to taste? I'll just taste that one because I recognize I have a complete sensitivity to it. So it
Mm,
coats my tongue, and then it just distorts what I'm supposed to be tasting. But I try to manage it as best as possible. Other things that I didn't necessarily like sarsaparilla. I never liked root beer and things like that. But I had a tasting once where we had to taste about 15 of them, and you're just kind of. I tried to make it like, all right, well, let's really just take away what I don't like, focus on what I do like to kind of get through it.
yeah,
And again, it kind of gets this a level of appreciation. I actually really don't like the taste of beer, but you kind of, once you understand how much goes behind making these things and appreciate the
totally.
craft behind it, it changes your perception. It's like, all right, I'm always willing to try. Always willing to try. And I think that's similar to the people we work with as our customers. We're always working with the product developers. So they have kind of these golden tongues. They're gourmands in their field or chefs in their field. Um, And so they'll also say, like, I'm not going to taste this. I'll use the judgment of the rest of the group. But typically they're always willing to try. They're always willing to try at least once, at least once.
And so when you're trying a flavor, I mean, what are you trying it on? Are you trying it in the medium it's going in, or are you trying it on some sort of like neutral sponge? I mean,
in the medium it's going into.
Okay.
In the medium it's going into. We can smell things. We can have smell strips if you wanted to, but it's really not, obviously it's not the same as when it's an execution. For example, if you have a corn flavor, it's going to taste very different on in a cupcake versus in a drink. You can put corn in a drink, but obviously the base will change that taste for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure texture has a lot to do with perception as well, right? Like
texture, all those other senses that I was saying, if it's umami, salty, sweet, all of those play into it as well.
Yeah. So when you're sort of interfacing with your clients and you're like, okay, IFF has developed this new flavor, we're excited about it. How do you sort of press innovation in the world? Because I do think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I suspect that when it comes to taste, people are very much like, I don't like that. I like this. This is what I eat. This is not what I eat. Like, I'm like that, Yeah. I mean, how do you help sort of shake up people's openness and I guess the chefs do that, but from a marketing perspective, like
it's really in the storytelling. It's really kind of coming with a compelling story, like, hey, this is what we're seeing as far as consumers are wanting these sort of flavors, right? Then we're kind of balancing out with, amazing concepts. So you're typically never just tasting the flavor by itself. It's usually mixed and paired with other things. What we find with consumers is they typically like what we call familiar with a twist. So that they have the familiar sort of food that they know mixed with a flavor that they don't know. But they're kind of leaning on what that kind of familiar flavor as their kind of base. And so we kind of make it exciting. We make it fun. We make, our presentations interactive with them. We want them to be involved. Sometimes they're the ones driving what we're working on. Like when they, they're coming with a brief, they're the ones asking and requesting us to work on certain flavor combinations and things like that. But by the time marketing gets involved, we're typically not kind of just doing alone singular flavors. Right. When we're kind of presenting to them, it's kind of like this complete package that you can kind of like, okay, roll out if you wanted to go to market with.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I find this stuff fascinating. So, okay. So basically you get people to try new ideas through storytelling effectively. Yeah. I guess that's the same in perfumery. It's probably the same in everything. Huh?
I think so. Or just trying to make those connections with people. Right. So, I remember when I worked at Sephora, a lot of it is, and I worked a lot in the fragrance side at Sephora. And I would have people say, I'm getting married in a couple months. I want to buy a perfume that I don't want to wear until that day. And every day after that, it's going to remind me exactly of that moment.
Right.
That's a connection point, right? That's something that is going to always connect them to that day. And that's all in storytelling. So it really didn't matter what we suggested. It was she had to have that kind of emotional connection too.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I suppose it's the same in flavors too, because I mean we do have we have these moments in like a meal or a drink or something that stick out and associate with memory. But I wonder if the association between taste and memory is as close as smell and memory. I don't know.
I mean, we've definitely looked at a lot of things over the years, especially kind of those like nostalgic flavors that resonate. I mean, we see really right now with everyone being home, kind of those nostalgic staples that you kind of grew up on, those kind of childhood flavors really are, being purchased again. If people kind of like, there's so much uncertainty and anxiety. It's like, I just want that thing that's familiar when life was much more simple. Yeah. And so it's kind of tied together. There are, things that you taste, you're like, oh, I remember this. It takes me back to very similar to what you would have with scent as well.
Yeah. And as Dawn reminded me, and I'm kicking myself because of course I know this, much of taste is through scent. So
yes,
there is that, there's that association through scent already.
Right.
Yeah. Donna Lipowitz reminded me of the Australian musk sweets. The
Ooh,
musk sweets I was referring to were from Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, and I think
I'm
she
gonna write
brought a
that down.
bunch back. Yeah, they were super good. She brought these
Ooh,
pink.
okay.
Actually, Donna, you want to talk about them?
I went back to Australia last Christmas, and one of my nostalgic childhood sweets is called musk lollies, and they come in like these sticks. I put a link on the thing, but I know that that's it's unique. Well, I don't know if it's unique to Australia, but I know it's not popular in America. So I brought them back to share with everyone from the Institute, and everyone was like, it's like eating perfume.
I ate them all. I think I'm the only person at the Institute that ate the entire bag of the pink ones. So thanks.
Yeah, addictive. They're addictive.
Yeah.
Anyway, your talk is great, by the way. This is great. I love this. So awesome.
Anybody else have any sort of specific food memories that are specific to your world?
Hey Saskia, it's Refugio.
Hey.
Yeah, when you were discussing, when the discussion went towards comfort, I immediately thought of like my mom's rice pudding in the Mexican cuisine. It's like arroz con leche, so it's like a warm rice pudding and like cinnamon sticks and like brown sugar. So I immediately pictured that. So I'm trying to answer to myself. I'm going to ponder on is scent and flavor is flavor memory as strong as scent memory? But like you said, it is connected, but it's really interesting. It made me think about it.
Yeah. And it is connected, but it is different, you know? I mean, the flavor somehow, for me at least, it hasn't really been the same, but possibly because we eat things more often than we smell those things, you know? I don't know.
I can see that. And I also think that with scent, it can remind you of people more than anything else. Like maybe if someone had a signature scent, like I said, if I smell certain things, I can think of my mom, I can think of my dad, I can think of my husband. Whereas with food, it's kind of this internal sort of thing. You might have had an experience with it, but it's a different sort of memory that's happening.
That's such a good point. Yeah. And it's also like the experience of your own body versus a person. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like, are there any trends in flavor? I mean, like there are in fragrance, I'm sure there are. I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious, are there any things happening right now? We talked about botanicals, anything else?
Yeah, botanicals is really big. I think, we're seeing in the past, every kind of major category in the food side would have like different trends. Like, okay, if you're in the sweets, you're talking about chocolates, you're talking about this, and snacks, it's, super sour. Right now, all the trends are kind of universal, and it's just in how things are being executed. So, they're all highlighting, obviously, botanicals, herbs, spices, global, regional, flavors and cuisines. Everyone's trying to, look for inspiration from other places, kind of, thinking about, as people have become to travel more often, they're experiencing all these new cuisines from all over the place and wanting to kind of recreate that back home. So this opens up a whole new avenue of new things that you just never heard of. We're seeing a lot of functional ingredients popping up across all different platforms with things like adaptogens, mushrooms, turmeric. We're seeing regional fruits. It can't just be your standard orange. It's got to be from a specific, farm in this state or this country. We're also seeing things with heat or sweet heat or combinations of that. Indulgence and what that can mean. People are more health conscious. They want indulgence, but they want it with maybe less calories, or just the things people want are just super duper indulgent. We're also seeing, along with kind of that, healthy ingredients, things like fermented foods. So the kimchis of the world, things that are good for, for gut health. And again, crossing over all different platforms. We're also seeing a lot of hybrids, mixing of different things together. So things like a bubble tea, which have been very popular, obviously, in Asian countries, but really moving here where it's got texture. It's not just a tea by itself. So how do we play with those sort of things? Those are kind of like the larger umbrella. And then within that, we're paying attention to a lot of these kind of individual flavors. We have a lot of love for fig. Some of us do things like yuzu. We're seeing a lot of things being used with jackfruit, especially in the alternative protein space. Yeah, things that, you think of primarily like rosemary for culinary, but it's showing up in beverages, it's showing up in confections. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun right now because there's so much crossover happening. So everyone's kind of just experimenting with everything.
But it's interesting because you wonder like sort of what inspires these trends. Like what is it that, why yuzu suddenly? Why is yuzu suddenly having a moment? Is this thing in society? Is it like a news thing? What do you think? What?
It's kind of all over. It could be from the flavor industry. That's something that they're wanting to promote. And so one company starts to talk about it, then everyone's starting to talk about it. It could be, like I said, being inspired from other regions. So what's interesting is for the US, a lot, we would rather, I'm constantly asking what's going on in other countries, and they're constantly asking what's going on here. Because they use the US as like the benchmark. Well, what's going on, here, it's going to come to our country and things like that. So they want to be ready for it. We're always like, no. What's your obscure, fruit? Like, what does that taste like? Like, what are these, we've never heard of these Japanese fruits. And I'm like, well, can we do something with that? Or, I heard about black watermelon. I have never seen a black watermelon. It's this luxurious, very expensive fruit, but I'm like, can we get that? Can we mimic that and turn it into a flavor? There's just so many things that are out there that can be inspiration for people, all over the place. You never know where you can get inspiration from.
I've noticed, like, I think maybe jackfruit is an example. Like, suddenly there was like jackfruit drinks at Starbucks. And I'm like, what?
Yep.
Where did this come from? And cool. So there's a question. Annabella wants to know if you could please talk a bit more about your work with chefs. What are the needs that they typically come to IFF with that you fulfill?
Yeah, so we work with chefs in two parts. We have chefs that are what we consider to be kind of our culinary chefs. So they take, in the world of flavors, we also have seasonings. And so they make, we can make sauces, we can do pretty much everything that's in your pantry at home. And so they work with our different flavors to see how they are cooked on foods. We experiment with, let's say we want to work on a roasted steak flavor. We will roast the steak. We will use special devices to kind of extract kind of what those sort of taste profiles, molecules, characters are coming out of that kind of smoking process. And then that gets translated back to our flavors to make like a roasted steak flavor. We also work with them, we have kind of these large innovation days, expos. So we do a lot of, they come with these amazingly cool concepts, like out of this world hybrids all day of just this fun inspiration. So I'm constantly learning from our chefs to find out, what restaurants should I be paying attention to? What chefs are doing things? Who are the James Beard Award winners that you really respect that are really pushing the envelope? So I actually learn a lot from them and then kind of translate that down to kind of our everyday customers.
Fascinating. I think Chach has a follow-up question.
Yeah. Related to hi, good morning. Related to that, I'm just curious about like the process of creating, like once you have the inspiration for a new flavor, like what happens with that, and then like what are some examples of kinds of flavors that are in development?
Okay, so that's the best way to. So the process is, okay, I don't know what happened to the thing. That's fine. The process is kind of multifunctional. So we have like, your standard sort of flavors that always existed. We're always kind of, improving on those flavors. So things like, we have, I don't know, hundreds of vanillas, hundreds of, like one has more of a buttery note in that vanilla. One has more cinnamon in a vanilla, things like that. But also, similar to the fragrance side of the business, we work in the molecular space. So we have tools that we come up with that will impart things to a flavor. So like I said, it could be having more of a sour impact. It could give you this perception of heat, but there really isn't more heat. It could, we can mask things. So if something's really bitter, we can put a bitter masker in it so it tastes less bitter. we have things that can give you the perception of having alcohol in it and it has no alcohol in it. So we do that as well as just like your traditional flavors. And then when we make those things, we can kind of, promote them out to our customers, tell them what we have that's kind of up and coming, what's available, but it's less about making kind of new flavors that don't exist, because everything is really from nature, right? Or from a cooking process or from something else. It's a little less abstract in that way.
Do people ever ask you for something that like this has to be the most unnatural flavor you can,
it does happen. I mean, we definitely do some work in the abstract space where, we have some tools where we can look at an image, a painting, and we can make a beverage based off of that painting. So we could look and say, okay, it has a lot of, blues and reds. All right, so we have a translation of blues and reds and flavors. And so when you're drinking this or you're eating something, you could be looking at that painting and say, oh, I can see how that can come together. Abstract, but in a really cool sort of fun way.
That's super cool. I find that fascinating, because in perfumery, you have the stuff that's sort of nature adjacent or nature whatever, and then you have the stuff that's like, sorry, this does not exist in nature, it's just bizarre and man-made, and I find that really interesting. So it's cool to hear that happens in flavors as well. Jazz had a really complex question that I'm asking them to ask directly. So Jazz, now's your moment.
Hi, sorry.
Jazz, no, it's okay.
Hopefully it makes sense.
It's a good question. I just didn't want to put words in your mouth.
So there's been examples of flavoring ingredients kind of democratizing flavor, kind of like vanilla, for example, right? In the 19th century. Have you seen any kind of similar transition these days? And are there flavors that are hard to reproduce, or just like people kind of choose not to reproduce them for that luxury aspect?
I'm trying to think. So what we find more is having flavors, we eliminate certain things that are included in the flavor. So it's not as much of, we're not using it, they're banned substances and things like that. We're just omitting, okay, if consumers are, they're not, they are concerned for their health for certain ingredients, maybe those things are not being utilized to make flavors anymore. What we've started to see more is, customers looking for organic offerings, more sustainable offerings. So when you're starting to do things like that, the crops become a real concern. Flavors is not all, it's not, a lot of it's not artificial, right? It's made from that crop of, grapefruit. So when we had a grapefruit shortage a couple years ago with the greening, that really impacted the cost of grapefruit. But it's not in the same way of kind of the sort of the ethical things that are happening on the flavor side. But somebody put an example. Yeah, okay, that's a different example. Thanks, Lauren. So it's a little bit different in scope to the fragrance side of the business.
Am I here?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay, great. So this is actually going back to the same conversation with someone in flavor who told me about the hibiscus being the true flavor profile of what we call hibiscus, because he was trying to create a soda which could also be used as a mixer, marketed to women. So I think flowers kind of fall into the feminine category, which is rather obvious. But I just wondered if you knew of other examples, women liking vanilla, women having more of a sweet tooth, women.
Okay, got it now.
Chocolate. I don't know. What are more masculine flavors? I guess grilled steak might be in there.
Grilled steak. I mean, you could think of, we've traditionally always thought of things like bourbon and whiskey, kind of the darker spirits, being more masculine in nature, but we're also seeing that women drink them just as much, right? I think when we were first starting to talk about botanicals, there was kind of this lens toward being more female skewed, but we're also seeing, there are plenty of, I have my husband on the spot here. He's a huge fan of elderflower. Like that, we had that at our wedding. We had an elderflower lemonade that was all inspired by him. So there's definitely crossover. I don't think all botanicals are feminine in nature. Things like juniper, right? We talked about gin. That's very masculine. But the grilled steak is just sticking to me. They find that to be very fun. But I'm actually more intrigued now. I want to kind of dive more into that to see if there are some others that tend to skew more more male and female. And I also think it has something to do with kind of that, back to that storytelling, what we've always kind of been told historically, and kind of these masculine and feminine identities, which obviously we're all, if you're on this call, you're probably about dismantling them anyway. And so, you know, what could that look like in the future? You know, there doesn't have to be that sort of differentiation between masculine and feminine in food.
I'm super fascinated. So luckily Jazz, who's on it, recommended a book called Diners, Dudes, and Diets: How Gender and Power Collide in Food, Media, and Culture. So thank you, Jazz, for that recommendation. I, for one, will be reading it. M. Kadri had a question, and M, if you want to ask directly, you're welcome to. I'll give you a second. If not, I'll ask you for you. Oh, there you are. Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to know if you've done any work with children, and how they process flavors, if there's anything different that you do with regards to children, basically anything that can help me to get my kids to eat.
Yeah, so we actually, we typically work with kids probably 8 and up, just based on how we're structured and different laws and things like that. But we do a lot of testing with them. We do testing with their parents. We'll put the flavors on different food and applications, and we get, if they like it or they don't. We have Children's Day at our job, Take Your Child to Work Day. That's a great day for us to do a lot of work internally, to test things. We've had some amazingly cool things that we've done and shown them, and to get their kind of honest responses to it. Picky eaters are picky eaters. We've done a lot of understanding with, moms and dads, and kind of doing that stealth health sort of thing. So kind of hidden veggies in different snacks, hidden veggies in things that, in beverages, so they don't know they're necessarily having it. We've been studying kids for over 30 years. We have a whole program on it. So especially at IFF, we actually have been doing a lot in understanding kids and how much it's changed over the last few years, because so many kids know so much more. They can tell you about the foods that they like. It's not just chicken tenders and French fries anymore. They're watching cooking shows. They're in cooking shows. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of the kids of today in a couple of years, and to see how they'll really start to impact the market.
Thank you, Em, for asking the question.
Yes, thank you. I hope that answered it.
And then on the topic of sort of experimental things, Corey wrote a comment kind of up a bit that says that roasted steak flavor example you mentioned reminds me of these Lay's chips flavors from Taiwan I bought last summer, like this Taiwanese crushed cucumber salad, something that Corey wouldn't think could translate to a potato chip, but was really good. And a lot of people sort of commented on that, and it did get me thinking that I feel like potato chips are a place where people can try really strange things. Is that?
Oh yeah, all the time. I feel like that's probably where I had the most experimentation, because you just have this expectation of just, plain potato chip, like, just a plain basic salt. And I've had everything under the sun on a chip. It could be very indulgent, just like a cake. It could be a cheeseburger.
Crazy. That's just crazy.
Everything. It's just been fun, chips are a great way if you want to do like a blind tasting of something, because you're not expecting it. You eat it with your eyes closed and you have no idea, what you're going to have next. So it's been really, really fun. I think some things we're looking at are, different flavors, seafood flavors, and how that could translate onto chips. Something we don't do here in the U.S., but obviously in other regions. So it's just been a lot of fun to kind of translate kind of, one dish on a chip, Thanksgiving on a chip. Right? Like a whole meal on one chip. I really like that Willy Wonka.
Yeah, I was about to say, it gets into like Willy Wonka fantasy land. It's pretty cool. Yep. I'm trying to think of because I've traveled a lot, and I've definitely seen some potato chips that were like, mind expanding, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen like a dessert potato chip. Mm-hmm. Does that exist?
Mm-hmm. I don't know in the market. I've seen more popcorn for sure. Birthday cake, limoncello, definitely more in the popcorn space that I've seen in the market for sure. But I've just tried fun things at work.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Susan, who's a wine sommelier, asks, so I'm guessing there's some information behind this on her world. Have you seen an increasing demand for funky or / barnyard flavors?
In savory, that fermented sort of world, so kind of the funkier the better. You know, it's got to have that pungent sort of smell, which we typically don't always have in the US. But as people are, you know, traveling and, like I said, going other places and experimenting and having, you know, trying different cuisines out, that is starting to expand in the US for sure. But more in the savory space. It'll be cool to see how that could translate into some of the other categories.
Well, Jazz has a quick question. Do you see a lot of scratch and sniff or rub and sniff being used in flavor marketing or flavor industry?
Sometimes, not as much. It's quite expensive.
It is quite expensive.
To do. Yeah, and I think it's just, you know, we're always trying to think of innovative ways now with everyone being home. This is really, now everyone's trying out different things. So could this make more of a comeback? It's possible as a way, but it's a very expensive way to show our flavors for sure, because it's really not just we're not smelling it, you have to lick it. It's a little different, you know, so it's easier to kind of have it on a base of something.
One last thing, like what should we look out for? One last, like, what should we look out for in flavor? What's something you're excited about?
Ooh, I'm excited for this sort of one-stop shop for everything. So like I mentioned before, like everyone's kind of in like, I want something that's, you know, good for my health, immunity. I'm stressed out, so I need things that's like I want this one magic that does everything or boost my mood. So I'm so intrigued to see kind of how that space is gonna expand, because it's really tied to your emotions. It's really tied to, you know, not just eating for the sake of eating in satiety. It's really kind of tying these other sort of functions in. So I'll be excited to see where that kind of goes.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Bayyana, for your time.
Thank you.
It was super interesting.
All right.
And, you know, love to New Jersey. And good luck as you continue on your day at work.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Disco Corey. All right, everyone. We will be posting this talk online. I'll just do a little editing, and that's it. Enjoy everybody's days. Go taste some stuff you haven't tasted before.